The xenical research team of the Galactic Confederation had encountered many bizarre phenomena in their centuries of studying primitive species. They had observed aquatic civilizations discovering fire underwater, an impressive feat. Really, they had watched silicon-based life forms compose poetry before inventing basic tools, questionable priorities, but fascinating nonetheless. Yet, nothing, absolutely nothing, had prepared them for the sheer absurdity of what they were witnessing on this backwater planet called Earth. Preliminary analysis suggests a minimal threat level, the lead observer transmitted to their colleagues. Their multifaceted eyes fixed on the educational facility below. These humans appear to spend approximately 1/8 of their limited lifespans in specialized containment facilities they call schools. The research team, safely cloaked behind their quantum camouflage field, hovered above what their database identified as a high school in a region the natives called suburban America. Their mission was simple: assess humanity's potential threat level to galactic civilization. After all, these peculiar bipeds had somehow achieved spaceflight despite still engaging in conflicts over artificially drawn lines on their planet's surface. Most inefficient, chittered the team's behavioral analyst, their antennae twitching in disapproval. Why not simply download all necessary data directly into their neural networks? That's the fascinating part, the xenobiologist replied. Consulting their holographic display, they don't have neural networks. They transmit information through atmospheric vibrations and store it in their squishy brain matter using chemical processes completely organic. The team collectively shuddered at the thought how primitively biological. Their attention was drawn to a particular room where young humans were filing in, carrying primitive data storage devices made from processed plant matter, books. According to their translation matrix, the observers had specifically chosen to monitor this class after their initial scans revealed it focused on something called history. Ah, yes, the cultural specialist noted with an air of superiority that made their bioluminescent spots glow just a bit brighter. This must be where they indoctrinate their young with carefully curated propaganda about their species' achievements. Classic behavior for primitive civilizations. If only they knew what they were about to witness. The lead observer adjusted their sensory inputs, preparing to document what they assumed would be a mundane display of basic societal programming they had seen this countless times before: sanitized versions of history, an emphasis on peace and progress, and a gentle introduction to cultural values. What they did not expect was for the instructor to walk in, slam down a stack of papers, and announce with almost inappropriate enthusiasm, "All right, class, today we're covering humanity's greatest hits of horrible decisions and somehow surviving anyway." The alien observers froze, their translucent appendages twitching in confusion. This did not follow any known protocol for educational indoctrination. First contact protocols suddenly seemed far more complicated. The classroom itself was a monument to organized chaos. Motivational posters featuring oddly proportioned cats adorned the walls, alongside maps of various human conflicts that, to the aliens' growing concern, covered nearly every landmass on the planet. A plastic skeleton wearing sunglasses lounged in the corner, having long abandoned any semblance of anatomical accuracy. Notice how they surround their young with reminders of their mortality, the xenopsychologist transmitted, intrigued. Fascinating psychological conditioning technique. The behavioral analyst started to respond but was interrupted by the instructor's booming voice. "Pop quiz time. Who can tell me about the time humans tried to solve a rat problem by introducing snakes, then solve the snake problem by introducing mongooses, and then solve the mongoose problem by, well, you get the picture." Several students raised their hands, practically bouncing in their seats. The aliens watched in horror as the teenagers enthusiastically recounted a cascading series of ecological disasters, each worse than the last, punctuated by bursts of laughter. Documenting concerning behavior, the cultural specialist transmitted urgently. The young appear to derive entertainment from their species' catastrophic decisions. The instructor paced at the front of the room, gesturing dramatically. "And what's the lesson here, besides maybe don't solve problems by creating bigger problems?" A student in the back, barely looking up from their doodling, replied, "Humans are really good at surviving our own stupid ideas." Exactly 5 points to your grade and my eternal appreciation for that beautiful summary of human history. The alien observers exchanged troubled glances through their compound eyes. This was not the solemn, reverential approach to history they had expected. Where was the careful curation of facts, the emphasis on dignity and progress, the proper respect for the gravity of historical events? Instead, these humans treated their history like some sort of cosmic joke, a series of ridiculous decisions, lucky breaks, and improbable survivals. Even more disturbing, this seemed to instill not shame or caution, but a kind of perverse pride. Updating threat assessment parameters, the lead observer transmitted nervously, any species that can laugh at their own near-extinction events while clearly not learning from them is potentially more dangerous than initially calculated. The instructor had moved on, writing on the board, today's topic, how humans accidentally invented half their cool stuff. You see that sandwich on your desk? The instructor asked a student in the front row. We only have that because some guy was too lazy to stop gambling long enough to eat dinner properly. True story. Which brings us to our first major theme, human laziness as a driver of innovation. The xenobiologist's appendages trembled slightly. They're teaching their young that laziness leads to progress. This violates every educational principle in the known galaxy. Correction, the psychological analyst transmitted grimly. They're teaching their young that they can turn their worst traits into advantages. Most concerning. The students eagerly shared examples of accidental inventions, each more improbable than the last: penicillin, a moldy lab accident, x-rays, someone messing around with vacuum tubes, chocolate chip cookies, ran out of baker's chocolate and thought, close enough. Are they suggesting, the cultural specialist transmitted in disbelief, that a significant portion of their technological advancement was achieved through mistakes and they're proud of it? Confirmed, the lead observer replied. They've turned stumbling into success into a methodology. The instructor continued, now drawing a timeline on the board, periodically adding little explosion symbols with concerning frequency. Now let's talk about how many times humanity has nearly wiped itself out and somehow come back stronger. I like to call this section, Hold My Beverage and Watch This. The alien research team collectively decided that their threat assessment protocols might require some serious revision. The lead observer's transmission was becoming noticeably unstable. They weaponized everything. Behold! The instructor pulled up a new slide. The agricultural revolution, or as I like to call it, how humans turned farming into a military advantage. Did you know that we once used exploding flour mills as weapons? That's right. Even bread can be dangerous in human hands. A student in the front row raised their hand. What about the time they used war pigs against war elephants? Excellent example. Nothing says human warfare like countering enemy war animals with our own war animals. And let's not forget the Swiss Army's historic habit of weaponizing the actual landscape. Because why fight your enemies when you can just drop a mountain on them? The security analyst's transmission was barely coherent. They turned their entire environment into a weapon. The mountains themselves. And here's the real kicker. The instructor grinned, advancing to the final slide of the section. All of this was just practice. Wait until you see what happened when we discovered chemistry and physics. The alien observation team's collective anxiety spiked. One of them was now stress molting. Question. A student waved their hand. Is it true we invented rockets because we wanted better fireworks? Absolutely. Humans have been turning party supplies into space travel since, well, basically forever. Speaking of which, who's ready to talk about how we turn theoretical physics into practical apocalypses? The lead observer quickly transmitted an emergency protocol suggestion: reclassify humans as extremely unpredictable. Handle with extreme caution. The rest of the team agreed instantly. The instructor switched to a new slide deck. The Industrial Revolution, or how humans speedran technological development using spite and coal. Unprecedented levels of concern, the xenobiologist transmitted as their sensors processed the upcoming lecture topic. These humans compressed several millennia of technological advancement into 2 centuries. Today's highlight reel, the instructor continued, includes how we went from horses are pretty neat to let's build metal horses powered by explosions in basically no time flat. Spoiler alert, we did it mostly out of impatience. The cultural specialists were now vibrating at a frequency usually reserved for seismic events. They're describing their species' most significant technological leap as if it were some kind of recreational activity. So, picture this, the instructor continued, pacing with infectious enthusiasm. Someone looks at a tea kettle, watches the lid bounce from steam, and thinks, what if we made that, but bigger? And then we strapped wheels to it. And instead of being committed to an asylum, they were handed funding. The class snickered while taking notes. One student raised their hand. Wasn't the first steam engine basically just a really dangerous pot? Exactly. The history of the Industrial Revolution is basically humans looking at increasingly dangerous containers of pressurized steam and saying, make it bigger. Until something exploded. Then we built it again, but with more math. The alien observers watched in mounting horror as the instructor pulled up images of early factories. Most species would take time to carefully consider the implications of rapidly transforming their civilization, the lead observer transmitted. These humans appear to have approached it with the same careful planning as a gravity-defying mammal approaching a luminous object. Check this out. The instructor pointed to a diagram. We went from maybe we should clean the rivers to the river is literally on fire so fast that evolution didn't even have time to blink. The Thames became so polluted it was basically a moving toxic waste dump. Did we stop? Nope. We just invented better water filtration systems and kept right on going. A student interjected, didn't we also accidentally create synthetic dyes while trying to cure malaria? Oh, absolutely. Half our industrial processes came from someone trying to do something completely different. We are the undisputed kings and queens of task failed successfully. The xenotechnologist frantically updated their analysis. Their technological advancement appears to be driven by equal parts deliberate research and catastrophic accidents. But here's where it gets really interesting. The instructor grinned, advancing to a new slide. Let's talk about how we turned air pollution into artificial nitrogen, created acid rain by accident, and somehow used all this chaos to launch ourselves into the modern era. The behavioral analyst's crystalline structure was showing stress fractures. They appear to view environmental devastation as merely an inconvenient obstacle. Fun fact. The instructor pointed to a graph. We managed to speed up our own evolution because all the pollution in London naturally selected for darker moths. We basically speedran natural selection. Though, to be fair, we were also accidentally speedrunning several extinction events at the same time. The class responded with appreciative woes while the alien observers' vital signs reached new levels of distress. And then there's my personal favorite, the instructor continued. The Great Horse Manure Crisis of 1894. Everyone thought London would be buried under 9 feet of manure by 1950. Solution? Invent cars. Create entirely new problems. That's the human way, solve one crisis by creating 3 more. Then solve those 2. The security analyst's transmission became increasingly agitated. Their problem-solving methodology appears to be, replace current problem with new, potentially worse problems. Then solve those through sheer determination and accidental discoveries. Look at this beauty. The instructor pulled up an image of an early assembly line. We basically invented new ways to make things faster so we could have more time to invent more things to make. It's like productivity inception. Class, let's begin. A student raised their hand. Is it true we invented corn flakes to stop people from having fun? Yes. And that's not even the weirdest food invention from the Industrial Revolution. We basically invented processed food because we were too busy inventing other things to cook properly. Peak human efficiency. The lead observer's final transmission for this section was tinged with a mix of horror and reluctant admiration. They turned planetary devastation into technological advancement. Their accidents into innovations. Their crises into opportunities. Most concerning of all, they seem to find this entire pattern amusing. The instructor pulled up a new set of slides. Now, who's ready to talk about how we went from basic industrial automation to computers? Spoiler alert, it involves a lot of people being angry that math was too slow. The alien observation team collectively agreed that their definition of technological advancement might need serious reconsideration. After all, they had taken the careful, methodical approach to industrial development over millennia. These humans had essentially strapped rockets to their civilization and hoped for the best. And somehow, it had worked. The instructor pulled down a new projection screen revealing a dramatic title. The Space Race: How Humans Got to Space Through Spite, Competition, and Recycled Military Hardware. The security analysts' crystalline form clouded with concern. Their space program originated from weapons. That explains so much, another alien murmured. The instructor clapped their hands together. All right. Their hands came together gleefully as the instructor asked who could tell them how humans decided to reach space. A student in the back row shouted that they basically pointed missiles up instead of at each other, which was acknowledged as an excellent summary of early rocket science as humans looked at weapons of war and thought they would make excellent transportation devices. The xenotechnologist readings became erratic as they processed the audacity of repurposing planetary destruction devices for exploration. The instructor continued through slides of early rocket attempts, pointing out that rockets initially exploded almost every time, but that did not deter humans who simply kept building bigger ones. As student asked if the first orbital trajectories were calculated by hand, which was confirmed as true as humans did complex orbital mathematics with basic tools. And when that became too slow, they invented computers, because instead of solving problems they eliminate them with extreme prejudice. The lead observer transmitted a note of hysteria at the realization that humans developed spaceflight capabilities out of impatience with mathematical calculation speeds. The instructor displayed a timeline showing how humans went from their first powered flight to landing on the moon in just 66 years, which was shorter than some human lifespans, whereas most species took centuries to make that leap. Humans approached the space age like an Olympic sport. The cultural specialist emitted distress pheromones at the realization that their development pattern was driven by competition and spite. The instructor highlighted how humans strapped themselves to rockets prone to exploding, and yet volunteers lined up for the opportunity. The alien observers watched as images of space missions were displayed showing how humans lost contact with spacecraft but kept sending signals for years until they responded. They had crashed so many things into Mars that they technically qualified as a planetary bombardment system. The xenobiologists tied their tentacles into knots upon hearing that humans persisted in communication attempts with lost technology for years and attempted landings despite repeated catastrophic failures. The instructor showed early spacesuit designs emphasizing how humans had to keep themselves alive in a hostile environment and essentially created a flexible personal spacecraft. Hoping the zipper would not break, a student inquired whether they had used joysticks from fighter jets to control spacecraft, which was confirmed as true since in their rush to space they used whatever was available, repurposing military technology for peaceful purposes and then adapting peaceful technology for further exploration. The security analyst was increasingly frantic as they noted the unsettling implications of human technological evolution. The instructor emphasized that humanity achieved all of this while simultaneously preparing for their own extinction via nuclear weapons, which demonstrated a unique form of multitasking. The behavioral analyst's crystalline structure showed signs of stress fractures at the realization that humans developed spaceflight while under constant threat of self-annihilation and considered it normal. The instructor then announced the discussion on Mars exploration, which involved deliberately crashing things into the planet's surface and hoping they landed right side up. The lead observer's final transmission for this section was barely coherent as they updated the assessment to note that humans did not just adapt to hostile environments but actively sought them out, treating them as challenges rather than barriers. A student pointed out that humanity had gone from throwing rocks to throwing themselves at other planets in less time than it took most species to invent the wheel, which was enthusiastically confirmed as true as the history of human space exploration could be summed up as holding a beverage while strapping themselves to a controlled explosion and punching a hole in the sky. The alien observation team unanimously agreed to upgrade humanity's classification to aggressively innovative and to handle with extreme caution. One of them was already drafting a proposal to establish a minimum safe distance of several solar systems, the instructor announced student presentations with evident enthusiasm, reminding the class that the theme was humanity's most creative problem-solving moments. The xenobiologist transmitted urgent caution that they were about to witness young humans interpreting ingenuity and urged their team to brace for psychological impact. The first student excitedly presented how humans figured out the Earth was round by sticking sticks in the ground and doing math, determining their planet's spherical nature in a remarkably simple yet effective manner. The cultural specialist's bioluminescence flickered in disbelief as the student continued explaining that when some people refused to believe it, humans simply went to space and took pictures to solve the argument. Another student presented on the Great Molasses Flood of 1919, explaining why building massive tanks of hot molasses in a city was a terrible idea. The security analyst's transmission stuttered as they processed the absurdity of experiencing a disaster involving a wave of sweetened plant extract moving at destructive speeds through an urban center and then turning it into a physics lesson. The student excitedly announced that the molasses moved at 35 miles per hour, creating a sugar tsunami which led to improved industrial safety regulations. The next presentation was on how humans fixed the ozone layer by realizing they had accidentally put a hole in the atmosphere with hairspray, deciding collectively that this was bad and working together to fix it. The lead observer was astonished that humans had successfully reversed planetary atmospheric damage. Another student explained how radioactivity was accidentally discovered by carrying glowing rocks in pockets, which horrified the xenobiologist as they processed the implications of deliberately carrying radioactive materials for illumination. Another student detailed how humans discovered electricity by flying kites in thunderstorms, which caused the xenotechnologist's apparatus to start smoking as they comprehended the deliberate attempt to attract atmospheric electrical discharge. Next came an explanation of how humans used bread mold to revolutionize medicine, deriving advanced medical treatments from contaminated food products, which caused the behavioral analyst's color-shifting scales to settle on an alarming shade of panic. More presentations followed covering how humans turned a mass equation into a weapon of mass destruction, how they accidentally discovered computer bugs with actual bugs, how they solved the famine by convincing people potatoes were not evil, how they used rubber ducks to track ocean currents. The alien observers watched in mounting horror as students enthusiastically detailed example after example of human innovation, persistence, or sheer dumb luck. The final presentation was on plans to clean up space junk by shooting lasers at it, which left the lead observer weak as they transmitted that humans intended to solve orbital debris by adding more energy to the system. The instructor praised the class and asked what they had learned about human problem solving, to which the class responded in unison that if something was stupid but worked, it was not stupid, and if the first solution failed, the backup plan was simply to try again but with more power. The alien team's final analysis concluded that humans appeared to treat the laws of physics as suggestions, considered both success and failure as equally valuable learning experiences, and were actively teaching this mindset to their young. A student raised their hand to ask if they could cover the time humanity almost had a nuclear war because of a bear in next week's presentation, which the instructor agreed to as long as they also included the time it nearly happened because of a flock of geese. The alien observers decided that their definition of acceptable risk required immediate revision as the final bell rang and students left the classroom. The alien observation team remained frozen in their quantum cloak position, struggling to process what they had just witnessed. The lead observer finally composed a formal report, urgently updating the Galactic Confederation High Command on the extreme unpredictability of human civilization, noting that previous assessment protocols were inadequate, that standard metrics for evaluating technological and cultural advancement required revision, and that humans achieved progress through a blend of deliberate research, accidental discoveries, spite, and sheer stubbornness. The behavioral analyst appended that humans did not hide their mistakes but celebrated them as learning opportunities, displaying an alarming level of adaptability. The most concerning finding was that humans did not solve problems methodically but rather created new problems, turned failures into successes, considered near-extinction events as setbacks, and treated universal constants as personal challenges. The xenotechnologist added that human innovation was driven by curiosity, competition, boredom, and caffeine. I wonder what happens if all previous technological development timelines must be reconsidered with this in mind, as the cultural specialists' final analysis was straightforward. They have transformed their entire history of mistakes, accidents, and near disasters into an educational course designed to encourage their young to pursue even more ambitious endeavors. The psychological implications are overwhelming. The security analyst's recommendation was equally concise, suggesting the immediate implementation of a protocol advising against provoking the humans. Meanwhile, in the classroom, the instructor was preparing materials for the next lesson. Great filter, more like minor inconvenience, a human's guide to surviving anything. The lead observer finalized their report, concluding that humanity cannot be assessed through conventional means, as they have endured their own worst tendencies, turned failures into progress, and devised an incredibly effective way to pass on this chaotic methodology to their young. Most unsettling is the fact that they appear to enjoy the entire process. The recommendation is to classify Earth as a Class X civilization, mostly harmless but highly unpredictable. Establishing a quarantine zone of no less than 5 light-years is advised. Under no circumstances should they be made aware of their numerous violations of assumed universal development laws. Additional notes indicate that they have already begun colonizing the most inhospitable planet in their solar system simply to see if they can, and projections suggest they will achieve faster than light travel sooner than anticipated, likely by accident while attempting something entirely unrelated. The final observation revealed that when the instructor assigned homework on how humans might survive the heat death of the universe, multiple students had already begun drafting proposals. May the cosmic forces have mercy on us all. As the observation team prepared for departure, they overheard the instructor reviewing notes for the next day's lesson, wondering where they had placed the lecture on how humans accidentally created an artificial black hole while attempting to improve coffee. At that moment, the aliens decided that some questions were better left unanswered. Activating their quantum drive, they retreated to a safe distance, leaving behind a small monitoring probe programmed with a single directive: observe, but under no circumstances interfere, as humanity seemed to be doing quite enough on their own.